And what's the emphasis of Luke about the identity of Jesus? Yes. Luke said that multiple ways last week. So there were 3 different sections of that bit we looked at last week. What was the first bit? Before the genealogy. The baptism. Okay, now what did the baptism of Jesus tell us about? Right, so that the Holy Spirit descended in the form of a dove. Heaven was opened, the voice spoke. What you're getting basically is the Father, the Son, and the Spirit all in one scene together. But the focus of what's happening right there is who is Jesus. And the voice makes it very clear. He is the Son of God. He is beloved by the Father, and the Father is well pleased with him. So right there at the beginning, before he's done anything, before he starts any public ministry, the baptism shows very clearly who he is to anybody who's there witnessing what's happening. So God witnesses himself. It's not Jesus introducing himself to everybody else. It's the Spirit and the Father witnessing who Jesus is. He's fully God, he's fully man, he is the Father. Okay, and then the genealogy. Now what do you remember about the genealogy? Right, and we talked about how the genealogy is backwards from the way it normally is, which is important because then it puts this emphasis on Adam and the son of Adam, the son of God. That's like the last line of the genealogy, which is important because, again, the emphasis of the genealogy is who Jesus is. Now, I saw when you said Joseph that you put it in air quotes, right? Because we already know that he is not Joseph's son. That's what it looks like to everybody else, but he's not Joseph's son. He's the Son of God, and that doesn't mean he's not fully human. He is. He's fully human, but he's fully God, descended ultimately from Adam and from God himself. And we talked, too, about in the genealogy how Luke manages to exclude all of the kings from the genealogy of Jesus except for David. And I don't know for sure, but I suspect that's because Luke is a Gentile, and he's writing for Gentiles, and his focus is not on the line of the kings of Israel so much as to say to the Gentiles, Jesus is your king, and it's not because he's a Jew, it's because of who he's descended from, which is Adam and God. That makes him the rightful ruler of all humanity. And why is the genealogy put right here where it is? Because again, Luke is emphasizing the identity of Jesus as the Son of God right here before he begins his public ministry. Okay, what happened after the genealogy? Tell me about the temptation. That's right. Yeah, to answer. That's right. Now, do you remember how Satan opened that temptation? Oh, okay. Do you remember how Satan began those temptations?
Walking the bread?
Right. Do you remember how he started? The first thing he said? Oh, if you are the Son of God. Because, okay, now, does Satan not know who Jesus is? Oh, he knows. Jesus does too. Why does he begin that way? I think he's trying to drive a wedge between the Son and the Father because, he's done that sort of thing before. Where did he do it before? In the garden, and it worked, right? With Adam and Eve, it worked. to say,
So Satan tries the same thing with the Son by starting off saying,
this. Now, what are in all three of those temptations, the ultimate temptation underneath it is for Jesus to avoid the suffering that is in the agenda of the Father, and to just take hold of all the glory, all the splendor, whatever's in the future, to take hold of that now without going the way of the cross. In order to go the way of the cross, he has to trust his Father. And Satan's trying to drive a wedge between the Father and the Son, and it doesn't work. So, yes?
So Satan's not all knowing. Does he know the cross is, or do you think he just knows there's something coming? He fears
I don't know.
something's going to happen.
I don't know. I mean, the prophecy going all the way back to Genesis 3 says, that he will strike the heel of the seed of the woman, and he will crush the serpent's head. I don't know how much Satan understands about that. But I think he knows enough to know that there's going to be war between him and the Messiah of some sort.
Yeah.
So, 3 temptations, none of them work. Jesus stands where Adam failed. Jesus stands, and he's the new and better Adam. He is again the Son of God, who is the rightful ruler of all humanity. Okay, anything else you want to add from last week?
Last week was the point with me. Jesus was sinless, but his identity was man, was him being baptized.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the section that comes next. So we're going to read chapter 4, Luke chapter 4, verses 14 to 30. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through the whole countryside. He taught in their synagogues, and everyone praised him. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. And he stood up to read. The scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him, and he began by saying to them, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. "Isn't this Joseph's son?" they asked. Jesus said to them, "Surely you will quote this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself. Do here in your hometown what we have heard that you did in Capernaum.' I tell you the truth," he continued, "no prophet is accepted in his hometown. I assure you that there were many widows in Israel in Elijah's time, when the sky was shut for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine throughout the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow in Zarephath in the region of Sidon. And there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha the prophet. Yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian." All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of the town, and took him to the brow of a hill on which the town was built, in order to throw him down the cliff. But he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. Okay, so how does the next section open in verses 14 and 15?
Social ostracization.
Yeah. Okay, now, what's he doing in verse 14? So this is important for what's coming.
He returned to Galilee
In
the power of the Holy Spirit.
Why does that matter?
He's a new man. I guess.
Why does it matter that he's in the power of the Spirit?
He's going to face rejection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he's not going to do it alone, right? So, following the baptism of Jesus and the temptation in the wilderness, when we pick up the story here, the emphasis on the presence and the work of the Spirit is significant. You remember the Spirit descended on him at his baptism, led him into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan, and now he's returning in the power of the Spirit. All throughout Israel's history, the Spirit has come on those who have been chosen and appointed by God in order to empower them to lead and deliver his people. So think about people like Saul, David, Samson, Elijah, Elisha. All of them are people who come in the power of the Spirit to do the ministry that God has for them. Now, of course, Jesus being who he is, we know that he's already got all the divine power that he needs. But the emphasis on the power of the Spirit makes it clear that the mission of Jesus is the mission of the triune God. It's the mission of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit together. Jesus is not on a personal agenda out doing his own thing. Like the kings and the judges and the prophets before him, he's doing the works that the Father has prepared for him, empowered by the Spirit. So, according to the Old Testament prophecies, that's actually a mark of the Messiah. It's a mark of the Messiah that the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him and will empower him. So everything Jesus is doing, he's doing in line with the will of the Father and the power of the Spirit. Because salvation is the group project of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit together. Let me read for you just real quick from Isaiah chapter 11. This is one of those prophecies about the Messiah, what he will be like when he comes. So chapter 11, Isaiah 11, verses 1 and 2. 1 to 3, actually, it says, "A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. The Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of power, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord." That's not the only place. There are other places in Isaiah that talk about when the Messiah comes, the presence of the Spirit is going to be very evident in the things that he does. And so here's Luke telling you, this is the guy. When he shows up in the power of the Spirit, he's the one who's been prophesied in Isaiah by these prophets who have been talking about what the servant of the Lord will do when he comes, particularly the Messiah. So he comes empowered by the Spirit. So right here at the beginning of Jesus' public ministry, he's traveling around Galilee. News about him is spreading through the countryside. He's empowered by the Spirit, teaching in the synagogues. Everybody's praising him. And then what happens in verses 16 and 17? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yes. So he's in his hometown of Nazareth. This is where he's brought up. This is where everybody knows him. So it's his habit, it says, to go to the synagogue. Now, by way of background, the typical format of a synagogue service would include readings from the Torah, which is the Old Testament law. So there'd be readings from the law, that's the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and then there'd be a reading from a prophetic book. And after that, a layperson would read and expound on a text of their choosing. So the scripture was written on these large scrolls, and so a scroll would be handed to the person who's going to stand up and talk. They would stand up to read the text. They could choose the text they wanted. They would stand up to read it, and then they would sit down to teach on it. So Jesus stands up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah is what's handed to him. So he unrolls it to a specific place in order to read the particular passage that he wants. And it just so happens that the text he chooses is Isaiah 61. Now, why would he choose this bit of Isaiah 61? Well, let's see what it says. So what's the prophecy that he reads in verses 18 and 19?
Do you want it read from Luke or from Isaiah?
From Luke.
I lost that one. And you want
18 and 19.
18 and 19. The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor.
Okay, so those particular verses from Isaiah,
Here's a prophecy about a man who will one day come as the servant of the Lord. And when he comes, the first thing it says in verse 18 is, the Spirit of the Lord will be on him. That's why Luke has been emphasizing it over and over and over. Because here's another prophecy about that. And the Spirit of the Lord will be on him because he will be anointed by God for a divine task. Now the word anointed, that's reminiscent of the roles of the kings and the priests in the Old Testament who were set apart by God to lead and deliver his people. And what will the servant's God-given task be? To proclaim good news to the poor, release for the prisoners, recovered sight for the blind, and liberty for the oppressed. He's going to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, or your translation might say the acceptable year of the Lord. Okay, now that prophecy is very interesting. When it talks about good news for the poor and freedom for the prisoners and sight for the blind and release for the oppressed, what does that mean? What would that look like for someone to show up and to release the prisoners? What would it look like for them to give sight to the blind or to release the captives? Yeah. Is it going to be physical? Is it going to be spiritual? Is it maybe going to be a combination of both of those things? Whoever it is who's coming, he's going to accomplish freedom in a way that nobody has done before. That's what the prophecy of Isaiah 61 is predicting. Now let's talk about that last line in verse 19. That phrase, the year of the Lord's favor, that's a phrase that's used in the Old Testament to refer to the year of Jubilee, which is described in Leviticus 25. Do you know anything? Do you remember anything about the year of Jubilee from Leviticus?
After all the land went back to the previous owners,
Yes? Mm-hmm.
there was no, I don't think there was any working.
Right?
Slaves got free.
Yep. So the slaves were set free, the debts were all wiped out, all of the land was restored to its original owner, and everybody took a year off of farming. So they got a break from farming for a year. That's really interesting. I mean, think about what that would be like if our whole nation just took a year off. And, yeah, sounds great, doesn't it? And all the debts get wiped out, and you're stuck at a job you hate, you get released from it. I don't know, whatever the equivalent of slavery is. And whatever you've lost, it gets given back to you. You get to go home. What an amazing, amazing year that would be. Now, why do you think Jesus would use that image right here? I mean, he's talking about himself, right? Why would the year of Jubilee be a picture of what's coming with the Messiah? Tell me what you mean by that, Sharon. Yeah, I did.
Whisper quieter.
Because he's come to set us free. He's come to break down the wall, the barrier between us and God, and give us the opportunity to not have to sacrifice and get walk boldly into the atonement of grace.
Right. So what is he setting us free from? Sin?
Yeah.
Death?
Salvation.
The power of Satan? Darkness?
Eternal death.
It's a little bit bigger than the debts of the Old Testament, isn't it? It's a little bit bigger than being set free from a physical prison. I mean, he's coming to do the kind of freedom and liberation that only God can do, because he's coming to deal with sin and death and Satan, like the big stuff. That's what's coming, and it's like the year of Jubilee. It's the year of Jubilee times a million. That's what's coming in the gospel. And so it's so interesting that Jesus chooses this particular prophecy then to talk about what it is that he has come to do for the people. When the redemption practices in the Old Testament, God put those things into practice, I think, in order to give the people a real live picture, not only of what he had done for them bringing them out of Egypt, but what he was going to do for them in the future with the Messiah. When he commanded them to participate in the year of Jubilee and all these things to do with redemption, what he's doing is giving them a sort of real life reenactment of his own redemption as a foreshadow of what he's promised to do for them. The essence of redemption is buying back at your own cost something that already belongs to you or to a family member. And the unique thing about the year of Jubilee was that redemption happened not because people earned it, but just because God commanded it. He just told the people to do it, and if they did what he commanded them to do, the whole nation would experience just this amazing year of redemption and freedom and liberation where people would get rest and a fresh start.
Sally, wasn't it also a picture to the other nations of trusting God?
Yes, and of how different the God of Israel is from the nations, because the gods of the nations tended to enslave their people, and the God of Israel was about setting his people free. Yep. I mean, we talked in Leviticus about, how if you were one of the nations around Israel, and they were to actually do that, if you were to see the nation of Israel release everybody from their debts, set all the slaves free, and then everybody take a year off the farm, would you not want to be like, okay, I want to live there? like I'm moving to Israel and I want their God to be my God. Because who would not want a God like that? Now, I don't know if Israel ever did it. There's no indication in the Old Testament that they actually did. But wouldn't it be amazing if they did for the people to see what the God of Israel is like when they see freedom and liberation all throughout the whole society? Okay, so that's the prophecy that Jesus picks from Isaiah. This prophecy about all these astonishing things the Lord's promised to do through a spirit-empowered servant who has come to rescue and free his people. Okay, now he reads that prophecy, and then what happens next in verses 20 and 21?
Everyone's looking at him and he says the prophecy's been fulfilled.
Yeah. And do you notice how Luke kind of slows down the action a little bit right here? That he rolls up the scroll, hands it back to the attendant, sits down, everyone in the synagogue is watching and waiting. You just feel the crackle of suspense right there. I have no doubt that Luke wants you to sense there's a very real drama in that room. Like, if you had been there, you could have heard a pin drop. And now, here's the punchline, and it's a serious mic drop moment. That prophecy from Isaiah, Jesus says it's fulfilled today. Like, in your hearing, so for the people who just heard him read that, the prophecy is fulfilled. The era of God's liberation has come. Why? Because Jesus has arrived. So freedom, redemption, restoration, and rest have all come in the person of Jesus, who's sitting right there in the synagogue with them. He is the Spirit-empowered servant of the prophecy in Isaiah. He's the one anointed by God to preach good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the captives, to restore sight to the blind, and to set free those who are oppressed. He's the one who has come to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, to issue in Jubilee. He himself is the ultimate Jubilee. He's the Lord's favor incarnate in a human being. It's a one-line sermon that's so profound. I just can't imagine what the people were thinking when he said that. When he reads that bit from Isaiah and then says to everybody, okay, here I am. I don't know. I would like to know how they all responded to that when they heard him say it. Well, eventually. But not yet. Not yet. Okay, now let me just pause here and mention a little side note. The way that Luke structures the text in 16 to 20, he structures it in a way that puts the emphasis on verses 18 and 19. Now, why does that matter? Because those two verses from Isaiah, define the nature of Jesus' entire ministry. It's like right here we're getting an introduction to who Jesus is and what he's going to do. And those verses from Isaiah are his chosen introduction to himself. And Luke's introduction too. The word Messiah, or Christ, by the way, means the anointed one. So here's Jesus introducing himself as the anointed one, telling the people exactly what his ministry is going to be about. Now, according to Matthew and Mark, this event actually happens later in the ministry of Jesus. But Luke reorders it the way he does for a reason. He fronts this whole scene with Jesus to tell us exactly what Jesus' ministry is going to be about before he actually even does any kind of miracle or any other sort of preaching. He brings this incident forward and puts it front and center because it gives you the perspective. That prophecy from Isaiah, it gives you the lens through which Luke wants you to see the whole ministry of Jesus. Here's the agenda of the Messiah, and it's an important way to begin. That he is here to set the captives free, to give sight to the blind, to be the redeemer of his people. He's not come first as a moral teacher, or as a good example, or as a great prophet, or as a wise sage, although he is all of those things. But he has come first and foremost to proclaim that by his arrival, the year of the Lord's favor is now at hand with everything that entails. The year of Jubilee was a foreshadow of the gospel, and it's come in the person of Jesus. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the year of Jubilee, again, in light of Israel's history, is in order for the people to experience what God intended for them in that redemption, they had to actually do what he said, right? They had to obey the command. The slave masters had to actually let their slaves go. The people who were owed money had to actually cancel the debts. The people who owned the land had to actually restore it. So the people had to cooperate, in a certain sense, if the year of Jubilee was actually going to happen. But that's not the case right here. Who's going to accomplish everything necessary for this redemption? Jesus is. And he doesn't come and say, now, if you all do this, this, and this, redemption will come. No, Jesus is coming, and he is doing everything necessary to provide redemption for his people. He's proclaiming a release that he's going to accomplish. He's the one paying the price for redemption himself. He's going to do for the people what they can't do for themselves. There's no command included in what he says here, because Jesus is the one who's going to do everything. It is good news. I mean, here's the definition of the gospel, that Jesus accomplishes for us a redemption and a liberation that we could never do for ourselves. Okay, now before we move on, it's worth noting that when Jesus quotes that bit from Isaiah 61, he actually leaves out a significant little bit. So, if you read, instead of reading the bit from Luke, if you actually read in Isaiah 61, those verses, well, let's just read the first couple of verses. So it says, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God." Now that's interesting, because Jesus left off that bit about vengeance. Why do you think he left that off?
But that's not going to happen until after he comes again.
Right. So it's not that Jesus is just a kinder, gentler version of God. It's that his ministry in his first coming is not about his vengeance, it's about the offer of salvation. Everywhere he goes, he's going to warn people and he's going to call people. But the actual vengeance of God is going to wait for his second coming. And it is Jesus who's going to bring it. But the time for that is not yet. His ministry is not going to be defined by vengeance. It's going to be defined by a welcome to sinners to come and be saved from the vengeance and the wrath of God. So, judgment waits a later time, but the focus now of Jesus is salvation. Okay, now how do the people react to Jesus in verse 22?
Can I read it?
Sure.
I lost it, but it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up.
But before that,
Oh.
verse 22.
22?
Yeah.
Oh.
We're going to get to the fury in just a second.
I was.
Do you want me to read that
You
one?
read the nice part.
Read the
I'd
nice
like
part.
to read the fury.
I don't want to take the thunder away. And all spoke well of him and marveled at the gracious words that were coming from his mouth. And they said, Is not this Joseph's son?
What do you think about that response from the people?
They were surprised and amazed
Mhm.
because they knew him.
Yeah. It's the nature of Jesus' ministry. Everything he does kind of forces a response. Well, this initial response, it sounds kind of promising. I mean, if the people of Nazareth are speaking well of him and they're amazed at all the words he's saying, this is his hometown where people know his background and his family. But it's interesting what they're saying about him, because they're saying, isn't this Joseph's son? Okay, now there's some irony right there, because is he? No, he's not, and we know that he isn't. Now, why does that matter? Because if he's the son of God and not the son of Joseph, That means he's going to have a very different agenda than the people of Nazareth do. I mean, there's some irony in the way that Luke is recounting it because we know what they don't, which is that Jesus' father is not Joseph. His identity as the Son of God, I mean, Luke made that so clear in the section last week. There's no doubt about who he is, but right here, the people don't get it. They don't know who he is. They think he's the son of Joseph. And so Jesus is going to make it clear he will not be restricted by their demands. They might consider him, a local and their native son, but his agenda is it's going to be determined by his heavenly Father, and that agenda is going to diverge from theirs in pretty short order. Now, it sounds all nice, like everybody likes him, and how does Jesus react in verse 23?
Surely you will quote this proverb to me. Physician, heal yourself. Do here in your hometown what we have heard that you did in Capernaum.
So Jesus is totally unimpressed by all that attention. What he says to them, I think, is intentionally provocative. I mean, when they're all saying nice stuff about him, Jesus, he's not going to let all that pass because he knows there's something else going on. He knows the unspoken thoughts in their heads and the fact that they have their hearts set on something that's actually contrary to the purposes of the Father. So they want Jesus first to prove who he is by doing the miracles. That's what he means with that first proverb, physician, heal yourself. And they also think that they should be the particular recipients of those miracles. It's like if he's one of them, if he's from the town of Nazareth, well then his power, whoever he is and whatever he's saying, I mean his power should have particular benefit for them. Whatever miracles he did in Capernaum, he should be doing for his own people in his own community. And Jesus directly confronts that attitude because he's countering the assumption that as Joseph's son, he's going to be a source of God's favor, particularly for these people. To expect that the people of Nazareth are going to be the particular objects of his time and attention is to completely misunderstand who he is and what he came to do. I mean, how do you get the favor of the Messiah? Is it because of the town you're born in? No. What is it that brings you to the Messiah's attention? Is it your wealth? Is it your status? Is it your intelligence? What is it that brings you to his attention? Yeah, your need and the attitude that you have toward your sin, a repentant heart. So Jesus does not show particular favoritism to people just because they are from the town where he grew up. If he were the son of Joseph, that might be the case. But if he's the son of God, that's off the table. He just has a completely different mission than what they're looking for. And then, I mean, if his initial response was provocative, now he ratchets things up even more, because then what does he add in 24 to 27?
I tell you the truth, he continued. No prophet is accepted in his hometown. I assure you that there were many widows in Israel in Elisha's time, when the sky was shut for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine throughout the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow in Zarephath in the region of Sidon. And there were many in Israel with leprosy at the time of Elisha the prophet, yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian.
Whew, that's serious, what he just said to them. So he starts off by quoting another proverb, that no prophet is accepted in his hometown. It's like Jesus saying to these people, despite what whatever's coming out of your mouth, he's like, I know what's really going on here. Familiarity tends to breed contempt, particularly if there's a challenge to the status quo. That's been true all through the Old Testament. The general lot of prophets in Israel has always been rejection and persecution, even by their own communities, and the people of Nazareth aren't going to treat Jesus any better. And then Jesus really, sticks it to them by drawing this comparison between them and the people of the northern kingdom of Israel at the time of Elijah and Elisha, which is of course described in 1st and 2nd Kings. Now, during the drought and famine of Elijah's time, There were all kinds of widows in Israel who the prophet could have helped. But where did God send him? To a Gentile. To a Gentile woman who lived in a Baal-worshipping region. And during the time of Elisha, there were plenty of people in Israel who had skin diseases, but who did God heal? A Gentile, that's right. And not only, a foreigner, a Gentile, but an army commander who was the enemy of the people of Israel.
Yeah.
Now, what is it that Jesus is getting at right there? It's not that Elijah and Elisha turned their backs on Israel. It's that in his judgment, God passed over the faithless in Israel in order to save those who were unclean and despised, but who put their faith in him. And Jesus' ministry is going to be a lot the same. There are going to be all kinds of people who think they're entitled to God's favor because of their status, their connections, or their proximity to Jesus, but they're going to get passed by because they don't really believe he is who he says he is. But the people who are humble and empty and aware of their need, they're the ones who are going to get the attention of the Messiah. And a lot of those people are going to be Gentiles. Or they're going to be tax collectors. They're going to be sinners. They're going to be people with bad reputations. What Jesus says here, I think, is another way of saying what John the Baptist said when he warned the people not to put their confidence in the fact that they were descended from Abraham. Your lineage doesn't get you favor from God. Being born in Nazareth doesn't get you favor from God. It's faith in the Messiah. That's where favor from God comes from. I think, too, one of the reasons that Luke includes this interaction between Jesus and the people of his hometown is because of the focus on the Gentiles. Again, you remember Luke himself is a Gentile, and he's writing to people who are Gentiles. And so right here at the beginning, before we see Jesus do any miracles, there's an indication that the Gentiles are going to be included in the ministry of the Jewish Messiah. Okay, now, Parker, how did the people respond?
I like the violence of Scripture. It builds it in for me good. So, all the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of the town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built, in order to throw him down the cliff. But he walked right through the crowd and went on his way.
Mm-hmm. So they get it when they hear what Jesus says to them. Oh, they hear what's going on and they get angry. But here's the thing. It's pretty dramatic how they respond. They don't just hear him and get a little, frustrated and be like, well, we're done listening to this guy. They want to kill him. I mean, it's like 0 to 60 and nothing flat. Why do you think they respond that way? Pride. And we're going to see that over and over and over in the gospel account. That Jesus is going to meet with violent opposition. And it's not because he offends people. It's not because he just rubs them the wrong way. It's because he confronts their sense of pride and entitlement. He threatens people's assumption of authority and privilege. And he's going to do it over and over. And people are going to respond with violent reactions to Jesus all through the gospel. It demonstrates this, I think, what's going on under the surface in Nazareth. It looked good on the surface to start with. But when Jesus says what he says, it's not like the people of Nazareth all step back and say, hang on, maybe we are like that. Maybe we are treating him a way we shouldn't be. Maybe we should humble ourselves. That's not how they respond. They respond in a way that makes it clear that they are ruled by pride and a sense of entitlement. Simeon, remember what Simeon said to Mary back in chapter 2 when he was talking to her about what would come from this child, and one of the things he said was, this child is going to be the cause of the rising and falling of many in Israel, and he's going to expose the thoughts and motives of people's hearts. That's already happening. Like right here with the people of Nazareth, Jesus is already exposing the motives of their hearts. And it's going to happen over and over and over, and there's going to be a violent response to that. Because Jesus is more than just offensive to people. He really is threatening to those who won't put their faith in him. So, the people are set to murder Jesus, but the end result is that in the providence and protection of God, he somehow just walks right through the crowd and goes on his way. And the text doesn't give us any hints about how that happens. Every time I read that, I think, well, I wonder at what point the people like looked around and thought, wait, where'd he go? And then maybe someone was like, I thought you were holding on to him. Did you have a hold of him? Like, where'd he go? What happened? And then when he just disappeared, did they stop and think, now hang on a second, who's that guy? Like, I don't know. It must have been an odd experience for all the people of Nazareth, but somehow Jesus just walks away. Now, that little scene is really interesting to consider in light of the last temptation that Jesus faced from Satan. What was the last temptation that Satan leveled at Jesus?
And wanting to throw himself down for the angel.
Yep.
Satan.
Yeah, and we talked about how that, when he takes him to the highest point of the temple, I think what he's actually talking about is the Temple Mount, because it overlooks the Kidron Valley, so there's basically a man-made cliff right there. So Satan takes Jesus to the top of this man-made cliff and says, okay, prove that you're the Son of God by throwing yourself off and basically see if God will save you. The psalm says that he will save you, so let's find out. If you're really his son and he's really pleased with you, let's find out if he will save you. And remember, Jesus wouldn't do it. He wouldn't test the Father. But what's happening right here? He's doing it. We're not told how it happens, but I think what you're seeing is the Father vindicating the Son and preserving him. Not because Jesus puts him to the test, but because Jesus obeys. And when he goes about the agenda of his Father, the Father's going to preserve him through everything that needs to happen for him to get to the cross. Jesus didn't have to give in to that temptation from Satan to demonstrate he's the Son of God who's loved by the Father. And he knew it. But right here, you see him being vindicated that way. And by the way, when you get to the passage next week, watch for the other two temptations to show up. See if Jesus doesn't get vindicated with the other two things that Satan tried to get him to do. So, passes through the crowd, goes on his way, which is the path of obedience. He's going to do what God has called him to do. Here's really the end of what we're going to see in the town of Nazareth. We're going to move on to Capernaum next week. But the public ministry of Jesus begins right here with Luke introducing us to the purpose of Jesus in his whole mission, and already the response that some of the people are having, at least the people of Nazareth are having, to Jesus and what he's come to do. Okay, do you have comments? Anything you would like to add?
I think of him just being able to pass through the crowd and everybody, they all think they're taking him, but nobody actually is. And when we step out into obedience, when we don't know the answer, we don't know, okay, what will it, will it lead to success, to security? How the path usually opens.
Mm-hmm.
And not in the way we would think, yeah.
Right. God will
Like,
take you
that's
where he
like an
wants you to go.
example.
That's right.
Yeah.
He'll take you the direction you want. He'll do what needs to happen. He'll make happen what needs to happen for you to be obedient. Anything else you want?
They're referring, and we talked about this, to what Simeon had to say. Luke 2:24, Simeon says, "Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, 'This child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed.'" When I read that and I think about, them trying to throw him off the cliff, we know that prophecy tells us that things aren't going to turn out the way we expect.
Right.
But I think even earlier we talks about how ugly this is going to be. Like, we know this is going to be ugly, and when they drove him to the edge of town and tried to push him off the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're just getting started.
Yeah.
That's right.
This is nothing.
That's right. There is serious opposition. kind of funny when you think about the mission he just told me now. I mean, if somebody comes along and says, and announces they've come to bring liberation and freedom, wouldn't everybody be all about that? But they're not. They're not going to be about that.
You know, we talked about that all the way through the book of Ephesians. We want to return to what was coming.
Yeah.
We're afraid of it. We unknown.
And we're afraid to give control to him.
Yeah.
When you rely on his grace, now you're not in control. Okay, we will stop there.